Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our next Black History Series presentation, Jackson Park Project, Celebrating Emancipation in the Classroom. Our guest speakers are Shantelle Browning-Morgan and Catherine MacDonald. Shantelle is a Greater Essex County District School Board teacher and curriculum partner for the Jackson Park Project and a recipient of the Governor General Award for Excellence in Teaching Canadian History in 2011. Catherine is an education coordinator and researcher for the Jackson Park Project and is a recipient of the Governor General Award of Excellence in Teaching Canadian History in 2013. So while Shantelle and Kathy are speaking, if you could all please mute your microphones and turn off your cameras so that it's not a distraction. Following the presentation, there's going to be a Q&A, so you can just type in your questions in the comment section and I'll read them to Shantelle and Catherine following the presentation. You can also raise your hand as well and I can call on you too. And you're all welcome at that point to turn on your cameras as well too. So thank you all for joining us, and I will pass it over to Kathy and Shantelle. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laureen. And good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this presentation on the Jackson Park Project, Celebrating Emancipation in the Classroom. We are very excited to share this information with you. We would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. We would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are meeting on land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. We thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years and continue to do so. Long before today, as we gather here, there have been Indigenous peoples who have been the stewards of this place. We recognize and deeply appreciate their relationship to the land. We also recognize the contributions that Indigenous peoples have made and continue to make, both in shaping and strengthening the country as a whole. This recognition of the contributions and historic importance of Indigenous peoples must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. We know that a land acknowledgement alone is not enough. It's merely a starting point. We must ask ourselves, how can we take action to support Indigenous communities moving forward? Kathy and I are deeply grateful to the following individuals and organizations for their guidance and generosity in granting interviews and access to their collections and archives, and also for reviewing our lesson plans. Irene Moore Davis, the E. Andrea Moore Heritage Collection, Lorraine Bridgen Lenny, Mary Catherine Whalen, the Amherstburg Freedom Museum, Kimberly Simmons, Carolyn Smarts Frost, Natasha Henry. 3 resources which were really helpful to us: Victoria Campbell's The Greatest Freedom Show on Earth, and Natasha Henry's 2 works, Emancipation Day, Celebrating Freedom in Canada, as well as Talking About Freedom, Celebrating Emancipation Day in Canada. Patricia Neely McCurdy, Phil Alexander, Christine Finley, Lynn Guest, Miriam Wright, and the Essex County Black Historical Research Society.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. And I want to echo Chantelle's sentiment that I'm very excited to present the work that we've been working on for the last 2.5 years. Shantelle and I are the co-coordinators for the education platform for the Jackson Park Project, which is a multi-platform, not-for-profit corporation, it's official now, created to explore, memorialize, and celebrate the history of the Emancipation Day celebrations that took place in Windsor, Ontario from the 1930s to the 1960s. The purpose of the Jackson Park curriculum, which we're presenting to you today, is to support secondary school teachers to teach Black Canadian history by providing excellent resources and lesson plans that reflect the voices and experiences of Black communities. It's also to provide a high-quality educational experience for students, which helps them to explore issues of race, identity, and history at an in-depth level. Early on, we realized that we had to overcome some barriers to teaching Black history in secondary schools, such as seeing Black history as just something that has to be focused on during Black History Month, or simply viewing it as one more thing to be added to what is already an overpacked secondary school curriculum. We decided to situate our education program in the compulsory grade 10 history course, Canada 1914 to the present. This course covers the time period which coincides with the Jackson Park Project, that being from the 1930s to the 1960s. Another benefit for us is that it gives us a captive audience of every 15-year-old in the province. We've created a program with 20 lessons which are embedded into the main curriculum. It not only provides teachers with ready-made lesson plans and activities to teach Black history, but simultaneously enables them to teach the core lessons of the grade 10 program.
I don't know what to make of this other than Alex Jones, like so many of the folks.
To ready-made lessons to teach Black history, but simultaneously enables them to teach the core lessons of the grade 10 program. We hope that by designing the curriculum this way, that teachers and students are able to clearly see that Black history is Canadian history. Our other goals were to create excellent learning opportunities for students to develop historical literacy, critical thinking skills, and engage in evidence-based learning. We're using a discovery learning approach where students are presented with primary sources such as letters, photographs, newspaper articles, and other sources which are first-hand accounts reflecting the experiences and voices from the Black communities in Windsor, across Canada, and the United States. Through completing activities and questions, students discover history for themselves, which creates a more authentic and effective learning experience. The lessons are designed to be mustard seeds, which are provocative, transformational, and inspirational, shining a light on Black excellence, resiliency, advocacy, activism, courage, and persistence in the face of ongoing racism. Each lesson plan is classroom ready, so a teacher can just pick them up and teach. They contain curriculum expectations, background for the teacher, key questions, all the necessary handouts and links to videos, teacher resources, and assessment and evaluation materials. Currently, we're in the process of editing our first draft of the curriculum based on the very thoughtful and much appreciated review comments and suggestions from the members of the Essex County Black Historical and Research Society. Today, we'll provide a very brief overview of the lessons. We wish we had more time, but we felt it is appropriate for this week especially to go into depth on the lessons related to Emancipation Day.
Before students and teachers dive into the materials on Emancipation Day, we have provided background information to ensure that they understand that Black history did not begin with enslavement nor European contact, but with ancient and prosperous African civilizations. This approach allows students to see Africa as the originator of Black histories and global histories. Now, as Kathy mentioned, there are 20 lessons. The very first lesson focuses on resistance and slavery in Canada. In this lesson, students will read multiple advertisements for enslaved people, and again, they're all Canadian resources, and runaway notices. Through an analysis of these primary sources and the supplementary activities, students will discover the truth about enslavement in Canada and the many ways enslaved people resisted. So for this particular lesson, the question that students will be exploring is what can they learn about slavery and resistance in Canada through the advertisements and runaway notices?
The ROM Connects was a collaboration between the Jackson Park Project and the Royal Ontario Museum to produce a two-part series on Emancipation Day. This series is still available on the ROM website. We felt that using this program was a great starting point as it gives students excellent backgrounds. In part one, Irene Moore Davis, president of Essex County Black Historical Research Society, and Natasha Henry, president of the Ontario Black History Society, give presentations on the history and significance of the celebration in Windsor and across Canada, respectively. These presentations will help the students to learn about the ongoing historical significance of the Emancipation Day celebration, as well as the impact of slavery in Canadian history. Activism and agency. Using the minutes of the Colored Citizens Association, which later became the Central Citizens Association, students will encounter and analyze the specific experiences of anti-Black racism in Windsor, along with the vigorous response and activism from the Black community to these many and ongoing acts of racism from 1928 to the 1930s. Many thanks to Irene Moore Davis for permitting us to use this resource. Here are some of the questions they'll focus on. What evidence is there that racism existed in the mid-20th century Canada, as many people are really very unaware that there was racism at this time period in Canada? Why can the response to the Black community in Windsor to racism at this time be considered a civil rights movement in the 20th century?
The theme we have chosen for lessons 4 through 6 is fighting a double war: fascism overseas and racism on the home front. These lessons shine the light on Black excellence as students learn the compelling stories of 5 Black veterans from the Windsor community and their heroic contributions to the victory in Europe. They will learn about Ken Jacobs, the highest-ranking Black officer; Ollie Brooks, the youngest RCAF pilot in Canada; Ella Jackson, the first Black Canadian Women's Army Corps from southwestern Ontario; John Taylor, who was killed in action; and Edward Henderson, who was killed during a training exercise. Students will also explore the racial barriers that these individuals experienced while serving their country. And here is an example of the essential question and guiding questions that students will explore as they examine a number of primary and secondary sources related to the 5 individuals and their experiences. Who was Ella Jackson, and why is she important to Canadian history? So that's the overall essential question. But then some guiding questions that students will explore as they examine the materials are: how can learning about the choices Private Ella Jackson made during World War II help guide our choices today? What can be learned from the experiences of Ella Jackson? How does Ella Jackson's story challenge your thinking? And what challenges did Ella Jackson likely experience?
Victory in World War II required dedication and commitment not only for the military, but from citizens on the home front. Windsor Goes to War, the home front, continues the focus on Black excellence as we look at the superb contributions of the Black community in Windsor, from children to adults who supported the war effort through fundraising activities, buying war stamps, victory gardens, joining cadets, the War Mothers League, and working in wartime industries, just to name a few things, all the while facing racism in their attempts to simply be patriotic Canadian citizens.
Despite the efforts of the Black community to support the war overseas and here in Canada, they had to fight to overcome racial barriers that prevented them from participating in the military and in war work. The response of the Black community to this is powerful and challenges students to examine the failure of our own democracy in not addressing this issue. In this lesson, students will examine a number of local newspaper articles which expose the anti-Black racism that people in uniform were experiencing here in Windsor. And the essential question that students will be focusing on is: what is anti-Black racism and how did it impact Black Windsorites and Black members of the Canadian military in Windsor during World War II?
Students will be introduced to the incredible achievement of the Black community under the leadership of Walter Perry and his organizing team from Windsor and Detroit to pull off the massive, successful Jackson Park Emancipation Day celebration. In addition to looking at all the events, such as the parade, the Mississippi contest, music contests, the lessons explore the organizational skills and year-long commitment required for the success of these events. The essential questions include: why were the Emancipation Day celebrations considered the greatest freedom show on earth? How do the celebrations in Windsor and across Canada help us to understand the Canadian civil rights movement? Why can it be said that Emancipation Day was not just a Canadian celebration? Why are the connections between Windsor and Detroit so significant? And how did Emancipation Day celebrations in Jackson Park show the Windsor Black community in the light they deserve to be seen? Students will learn about the origins of Emancipation Day in 1834 and the spread of the celebrations across Canada in our next lesson on Emancipation Day background and purpose. Using Walter Perry's own words from Progress, which is the annual program for the Emancipation Day celebrations, students will explore his courageous and prescient vision of interracial harmony and dedication to civil rights, which underscores the deeper purpose of Emancipation Day, of the achievement of racial justice, and again, deeply reflected in the Emancipation Day celebrations and events. In 1947, you can see from just a few little excerpts from what you see on the page there, he wrote, "Colored men and white men fought to the death in World War II, side by side, sacrificing impartially in the cause of freedom and for love of a common ideal. Today, the fight is to preserve the peace, a cause which knows no color." And in the second excerpt there, you see on the page on the right, "Welcome, friends, to the annual 3-day Emancipation Day celebration, the result of months of careful planning and stringent budgeting. Every care has been taken to guarantee that you and your family, regardless of color, race, or creed, have the best time you've ever known. And at the same time, we invite you to pause with us in solemn rededication to the principles which make democracy the greatest living force for good." Using the program from 1954, students will examine evidence of the incredible variety of activities that were successfully mounted each year, from full-scale operas, dances, food, carnival rides, as well as the many committees, social clubs, and organizations and infrastructure that had to be coordinated to mount these celebrations, and the economic benefits to the city of Windsor. They'll be engaging in some math activities. A jigsaw activity will be used to further examine the events, participants, organizational aspects, and the purpose of Emancipation Day celebrations. A jigsaw activity works in the following way. I know most educators who are present will understand this, but anyway, here it is. The class is divided into smaller groups, and each of these groups becomes an expert in one of the topics, such as the ones you see listed from A to I on the screen. They're divided into small groups, and each of these groups becomes an expert in one of these topics by reading and analyzing materials and answering the questions on their topic. After completing this study, they then share their experiences with the rest of the class. We're going to take a look now at some of the topics the students will explore in this exercise. The churches, which were the original and ongoing place of celebration for Emancipation Day, reflecting their critical role as the backbone of Black communities. The International Mississippi Contest, in this topic, students will explore concepts of beauty, connection to Detroit, and women's roles at this time. The parade looks at the strong participation and connection to Detroit, excellence in performance, diversity of attendees and participants, and just the sheer excitement of this 4-hour event. The food topic showcases the mouth-watering recipes, the secret sauce, family picnics, family recipes, and the amazing organizational skills was required to feed over 10,000 visitors each year. To shine the light on Black excellence, students will be asked to select just one of these events and to list at least 10 things they would need to do to organize just this one single event. They will soon see, as they present them to the class, their list to the class, the overwhelming level of skill, ingenuity, dedication, and cooperation required to coordinate these annual massive celebrations. Music contests, the Motown Sound and Stars, the Midway, dances, sport competitions, and other activities appeal to all ages from children to teens to their parents, and free ice cream was included for kids too. Students will explore these and others as well to capture the flavor and exciting atmosphere of the experiences of these celebrations, which were the highlight of the year for those people participating. Black communities and allies, Emancipation Day celebration, activism, community building, and service. Students will be presented with articles highlighting the roles of the following organizations from Windsor and Detroit who annually participated in hosting and organizing the celebrations at Jackson Park. While Walter Perry became known as Mr. Emancipation, he was supported by Emancipation Day Committee and a very strong community of churches and men and women in many service clubs in the Black communities in Windsor and Detroit. And we'll ask students to focus on some of the following things: to describe the important roles of the church in Black and we should say also American communities. What were the three most important goals of the British American Association of Colored Brothers? Choose and justify three most important reasons why the work of the Central Citizens Association can be seen as the start of the 20th century civil rights activism in Windsor. What other groups from the Black communities in Windsor and Detroit participated in these annual events?
And continuing with the Jigsaw Activity, we wanted the students to understand that although emancipation was a celebration, it also became more grounded in the American Civil Rights Movement. And we wanted to highlight some of the activists who came across the border to address crowds of thousands during emancipation celebrations, which include, but is not limited to, Myrlie Evers, the widow of Medgar Evers, Mary McLeod Bethune, Fred Shuttlesworth, Adam Clayton Powell, William Holmes Borders, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Students will read excerpts from their speeches at Jackson Park and complete a historical thinking activity.
At the end of the lessons on Emancipation Day celebrations, students will have the opportunity to reflect and respond both creatively and analytically to the issues related to the celebrations and to civil rights. We've also included other responses, which we'll go over later in our presentation. But this gives you kind of a sense of where we're going to take the students and how they can reveal their comprehension. We have a couple of creative responses, and these are just, again, a few examples, where we want students to really convey how it would have felt to have experienced the celebrations themselves by writing a diary, a paragraph or so, depending on if this is applied or academic level, for each of the 4 days or 3 or 4 days, depending on the year of the celebrations, for the Emancipation Day celebrations, describing what it would have been like to have experienced this, or to write a one-page letter to a friend about your experiences at Emancipation Day. What changed you, how you reacted to different things, the things you loved, enjoyed, and why other people enjoyed these celebrations so much. As far as evaluation goes, because Shantelle and I are historians, we love essays. So we've got several essay topics, and with all the support materials and examples for teachers to teach essay writing. And see, these are some of the suggestions that we're offering to teachers. Walter Perry said that Emancipation Day celebrations showcase the Black community in Windsor, and I will say as well in Detroit as well, in the light they deserve to be seen. Using 3 convincing arguments, write a 5-paragraph expository essay in response to this statement. Other topics would include many Emancipation Day civil rights speakers spoke passionately about the need for members of the Black community to be given the rights of full citizenship. What areas did they identify that need to be changed? Why is racism a threat to democracy? And the last one we've suggested there is, why did the Emancipation Day celebrations deserve to be called the greatest freedom show on earth?
In spite of the contributions of the Black community to the war efforts, many racial barriers to jobs, economic security, and freedom still existed. In lessons 10 through 12, students will examine these issues and some of the key individuals, such as Walter Perry, Hugh Burnett, Patricia Neely McCurdy, and Dr. Howard McCurdy, who fought for and achieved progress in removing barriers in Canada. And this will just allow students to see the context and some of the things that the members of the Black communities were experiencing at that time, focusing on the 1930s through the 1960s.
One of the examples that Shantelle just mentioned is Walter Perry, Mr. Emancipation himself. And we're going to use similar sorts of questions for guide questions for the other leaders that Shantelle just mentioned. But they go somewhat like this. Why should Walter Perry be considered a great leader for civil rights in Canada? What insights does Walter Perry's life give us into the struggle for civil rights in Canada? And how do the Emancipation Day celebrations in Jackson Park reveal the agency and resiliency of Black Canadians? It's noteworthy to point out that one of the articles in the center under the title Now is Walter Perry's personal response to the experience himself of being refused service in a restaurant in spite of all the work he was doing for interracial harmony in the Windsor community and the tremendous economic benefits that the celebrations brought to the city. We were shocked when we read this, and just it was heartbreaking to read it. It goes to show how deeply personal and hurtful racism in Canada was at this time, and the students can easily draw parallels to examples like that today.
In lesson 13, it focuses on many attempts to stop the Emancipation Day celebration as an annual event. Here, students will examine how erasure of history takes place and look at many factors that led to the decline of the greatest freedom show on earth. So I'll go into a little more into depth in this one. The essential question is, what do you think was the most important factor that contributed to the decline of Windsor's emancipation celebrations? So you'll see that they have to answer this question at the end in their culminating activity. And the guiding question for students is, what conditions or events led to the decline of emancipation celebrations in Windsor? Dr. Martin Luther King was one of the keynote speakers during Windsor's emancipation celebration, and we included him in this section on the decline because many scholars have argued that once emancipation became more connected to the American Civil Rights Movement, there was less support, more pushback, and growing tensions between the Emancipation Organizing Committee and the City of Windsor. We want students to examine it and figure out if that was indeed the case. So they'll answer questions like, what was the purpose of this clipping? What does Dr. King's presence at Windsor's emancipation celebration suggest about the celebration? What does this clipping suggest about Walter Perry? And according to this clipping, what was King involved in the United States? Because this was just following the Montgomery bus boycott. In 1957, the grandstand and bandshell at Jackson Park caught fire. The grandstand in Jackson Park had been the site of speeches from civil rights giants, as well as some of the greatest performers to grace any stage. The fire broke out in the afternoon and faulty wiring was to blame. Fire hydrant difficulties allowed the blaze to rage on for 40 minutes before it could be tended to. After students will read the very brief article, they will analyze the image and complete a see, think, wonder activity, answering questions such as, what do you see? What catches your eye? What do you think is going on? What does this make you wonder? What questions does this image raise? In 1960, there was a riot at Windsor Arena at a rock and roll show being held during the same weekend as the Emancipation celebration, although the two events were completely unrelated. The brawl involved some men from Detroit. As a direct result, attendance rates at the 1961 Emancipation were low, and the blame was on the riot. So again, students will read it and answer some questions such as, why do you think an unrelated riot from the previous year caused lower attendance? According to this excerpt, had there ever been any violence at emancipation celebrations in Windsor? Also, according to this excerpt, what happened during the 1960 Emancipation Celebration weekend in Windsor? In July 1967, a violent uprising broke out in Detroit, Michigan. 43 people died, hundreds were injured, and nearly 1,400 buildings were burned. Thousands of National Guard and U.S. Army troops were called in. This uprising lasted for 5 days. As a direct result of this uprising, Windsor's Emancipation celebration of 1967 was canceled. So students will learn about the uprising, learn about Walter Perry's decision to cancel the celebration that year, and then they will answer the following questions. What was the purpose of the article? Why did Walter Perry cancel the celebration? And we want to know if students think that Perry and the Emancipation Committee made the right decision to cancel the celebration of 1967. Although the 1967 Emancipation celebration was canceled, the Progress magazines had already been printed. Students will read the excerpt from Walter Perry to learn a little bit more about how he was feeling that year. And as with most of the primary sources, Kathy and I transcribe the documents for students. So they always have access to the primary source, but then we've transcribed it. So after students read Walter Perry's own words, they will answer some of the following questions. What type of document is this? Who wrote the document and why is that important? Then we want them to focus on something that Perry said. He said, the city has two standards, especially since this International Freedom Festival is promoted by Detroit and Windsor. It appears to me at any cost, kill the Emancipation and support the Freedom Festival in Windsor. And we want students to answer, why did Walter Perry write that? Like, what was making him feel that way? Who was the audience? And what questions does this raise for them? These types of questions here help to build historical literacy. Kathy and I aimed for our questions throughout all of the lessons to teach students the difference between information and knowledge. For information to become knowledge, students need to think about it as opposed to memorizing. So our questions are designed to enhance historical literacy and historical thinking. Sadly, in 1967, Walter Perry, Mr. Emancipation himself, passed away. Students will read the article about his untimely passing and respond to 3 questions about the article and about Walter Perry's character. The following year, in 1968, City Council requested an investigation by the Windsor Police Commission to explore the potential for civil unrest if the Emancipation celebration were to be held that year. The request was based on the lingering fears from the Detroit uprising of 1967, the previous year. The Police Commission recommended that the Emancipation celebration not be held because the carnival and parade attracted large numbers of Detroiters. Although the parade permit was eventually granted, the police commissioner refused to give a permit for the carnival, which was imperative to the rest of the celebration because of the revenue it generated. A complaint was filed with the Ontario Human Rights Commission arguing that the decision was grounded in racial discrimination. It should be noted that the International Freedom Festival, which also attracted large numbers of people from Detroit, was not canceled that summer. In the end, the 1968 Emancipation celebration was canceled. And students will answer some of these historical thinking questions. What does the headline suggest? Why might the Freedom Festival have been held that summer but not Emancipation? And then we want them to look at some of the direct quotes from individuals involved. So the head of the police commission, Bruce MacDonald, said, "We don't expect any riots from those occasions," when he was asked about why the Freedom Festival was not canceled. We want students to answer, what do they think he meant by that? Also in that article, Dr. Howard McCurdy stated, "We are citizens of this community. We have a right to disagree with you and, if necessary, as citizens to try to change the situation that permits such a decision. There have been in the city of Windsor over the years quite a number of instances of racial discrimination." And we want students to take Dr. McCurdy's statement and figure out, what does it suggest about race relations in Windsor at that time. The celebration soon thereafter was moved to Micmac Park. Students will read about the relocation and respond to 2 questions. We want them to answer what the purpose of the article was, but we also want them to describe the underlying tensions that existed in Windsor over the issue of moving Emancipation Day celebrations out of Jackson Park, which was a central location, out to Micmac, which was further out into the West End. In 2010, Irene Moore Davis, president of the Essex County Black Historical Research Society, made this statement regarding the Freedom Festival, and this appeared in Victoria Campbell's work on emancipation. There are a lot of people in the African Canadian community to this day who have a great resentment and hostility about the International Freedom Festival. It was seen by the Black community, or by many in the Black community, as a way to take the spotlight away from the Emancipation Festival and build on what the Emancipation Festival had already achieved. You know, not reinvent the wheel, but copy a lot of their ideas, and just about a month earlier do very similar things that would of course make it less likely for folks to come back and participate in the August event. It was really viewed as something deliberate and cruel, and I've heard a lot of the older folks say that for a while they did not participate in the Freedom Festival because they felt it had been a slap in the face. So after students have read the quote from Ms. Moore Davis, they will complete the guiding questions. As students explore and examine the sources in this lesson, they will realize how history can become gradually erased, something that is far too common among Black histories and Black experiences. So here are examples of the questions that they will answer. How does information from the statement support or extend information from previous documents? What was the main message of her statement? And do students feel that the International Freedom Festival was used as a way to take the spotlight away from the Emancipation celebration? And they must explain their reasoning. Once students have a greater understanding of the many factors that contributed to the slow and gradual decline of the Emancipation celebrations, they will be asked to create a timeline of the events in chronological order. Then, as a culminating activity, they will answer that question that was from the beginning, the essential question: what do they think was the most important factor that contributed to the decline of Windsor's Emancipation celebrations? So they have to decide after they have sorted through all of the evidence. They must provide their own evidence from the documents and be able to justify their position and explain all of the evidence that they have selected. Thank you.
In one of our final activities, students will explore how Emancipation Day is celebrated across Canada, the United States, and the globe. The activity they will use to discover this is a gallery walk, where a series of photographs from Emancipation Day photos are posted along the walls of the classroom. They will explore photos from Emancipation Day celebrations today from Windsor, across Ontario, Canada, the United States, the Caribbean, the UK, and countries in Africa, and will answer the following questions you see on the slide. The essential questions are: why can Emancipation Day be considered a global celebration? The evidence is right there before them. How did the Emancipation Day celebrations in Windsor, across Canada, the US, and across the world help us to understand the impact of colonialism? Why is Emancipation Day not just a Canadian celebration? How do Emancipation Day celebrations reflect and preserve Black cultures across the globe? And how did the celebrations, and how does colonialism contribute to racism on a global scale? So you can see from the images, they'll see evidence of vibrant Black communities celebrating emancipation today across Canada, from coast to coast, even in the territories such as Nunavut. That was one of our favorite posters that we collected. In the next set of slides, students will further deepen their understanding and appreciation of the international nature of Emancipation Day through these images of celebrations in the United States. In the next set of slides, students will see evidence of joyous celebrations across the Caribbean. And finally, they will see images such as these from the United Kingdom on the left-hand side, and from many African countries, including South Africa, which you see on the right. And you'll notice they have a different date on that one, the 1st of December, 1834, not August 1st. As one of our wrap-up activities, we'll go to the second part of our ROM Connect series, where Dr. Cheryl Thompson from the Metropolitan Toronto University, formerly Ryerson, examines the history of Emancipation Day celebrations in the Caribbean and their connection to the Caribbean Festival, formerly known as Caribana, where over 1.5 million people from all over North America and the Caribbean come to celebrate annually in Toronto. The final speaker, Rosemary Sadler, former president of the Ontario Black History Society and current president of Toronto Commonwealth Society, examines the long but ultimately successful campaign to have Emancipation Day declared by the Canadian government as a national day of recognition. We felt that this second part of our presentation, the ROM presentation, was a very good bookend to all these lessons, as the federal government of Canada is officially declaring Black history is Canadian history. Students would be would be addressing the questions that you see on the page based on watching this presentation. Why can we say that Emancipation Day is a global freedom movement? Give examples to show that Emancipation Day is a Canadian-wide celebration. How do Emancipation Day celebrations link the histories of Canada and the United States? And how does the Emancipation Day celebration here show Canada's connection to global history? Very often when we do the grade 10 history course, it seems to be very focused on our I don't want to say navel gazing, national navel gazing, but I want students, Shantelle and I really want students to be aware that they're really part of the African diasporic history, international history with the United States. And it's much richer and deeper what we're presenting to them.
Kathy and I have also provided examples of, a lot of examples and activities that can be done by classes or school-wide for students to reveal their learning about Black history, excellence, resilience, advocacy, as well as the racism that has been experienced in the past and the ongoing efforts to combat those barriers. We have included engaging and meaningful lessons and activities that can be taught across the curriculum in various subject areas.
These are just a few examples of the many opportunities which Shantelle was referring to for students to reveal their learning in a way that honors their unique talents and interests and allows them to add to the education of others in the school. Each of these options is linked to the lessons we've already gone over, and all the support materials for these activities are provided for teachers and students. And you can see here, we're using things like museum displays where students create artifacts and museum displays that other students can use as scavenger hunts, and they can do this for World War II, Emancipation Day, the Civil Rights Movement, and any of the other parts that we've talked about in other topics and time periods we've talked about in this lessons. They can also do poster competitions, photo essays, and of course, one of our favorites, essay writing. But I want to draw your attention to the last item, which is the plaquing exercise. And again, this can be applied to any of these themes right here. And what we've done is we've presented for teachers a package based on the Ontario Historical Society and also Parks Canada plaquing requirements. And we boiled it down to a lesson where students can identify and create their own plaques for local history, their local Black history related to World War II, Emancipation Day, and civil rights, whether they're in Windsor, in St. Catharines, Owen Sound, Toronto, Nunavut, they're able to do that. And we think this is a way for them to really show what they think is important. And also, in a sense, plaques have become very contentious recently, and this is enable students to do kind of amending plaquing based on these themes as well.
And here are some of our next steps as we move forward. We will be selecting teachers from the Windsor and Durham regions to pilot the curriculum. We will be completing the second draft based upon the feedback from members of the Essex County Black Historical Research Society. We will have the curriculum reviewed by the Ontario Black History Society. We will be providing professional development for the selected teachers. Field testing will take place in the fall in both the Windsor and Durham regions. We are planning to present our curriculum at OHSTA, that's the Ontario History and Social Science Teachers Association, in November. We will have our final revisions done by December 2022. Our final draft will be completed in January of 2023 with a launch date of February 2023, which starts Black History Month, but is also the start of second semester for high school students. Kathy and I would like to thank you so much for tuning into our presentation today. We value and appreciate your time and are just grateful that you are here with us. We've been very excited and eager to share this curriculum with you. We will now open the floor for questions and/or comments.
So I first wanted to just start by thanking you both so much for all of your dedication. This is a huge undertaking and you can see the hard work that you put behind it. So not only thank you for putting this together, but for presenting it to us today. I did have one question to start while our audience is also thinking of questions. You spoke about Emancipation being an international event, which I completely agree. Do you think that there's potential for this curriculum to be taught in Michigan, like the Fluid Frontiers curriculum that you created, or other areas as well? You'd mentioned it's going to be Windsor and Durham, but is there potential for other places outside of this area?
I would say that there is definitely potential because it is such a rich and shared history on both sides of the Detroit River that I think it would be beneficial to be piloted in Michigan as well. Great question, Laureen. Thank you.
And that also raises to the point about other border states with the intensified Emancipation Day celebrations that we see in Niagara, St. Catharines, all those areas that are very close to New York State as well. With their rich history of Underground Railroad, it would be great to if they would be willing to adopt it as well. So,
yeah, I think there's so much potential for this. It's such an amazing project you've done. We do have a question from Kimberly Simmons. She's got her hand raised, so you can go ahead, Kimberly.
You're on mute,
You're
Kim.
muted,
There,
Kimberly.
I'm not anymore. Okay. Hi, ladies. How are you?
good.
Good to see you. Wonderful job. I salute you. I applaud. It's very well done. I just have a question about the 67, 68 timeline and the whys and the why nots. And especially regarding the creation of the Freedom Festival at that time and the Emancipation's cancellation in 67 and the questioning of it in 68. You did not indicate why the Freedom Festival happened, and you didn't clarify what happened with Emancipation in 67. So I guess, are you intending to do that? Because there is a reason that the Freedom Festival became promoted and the Emancipation didn't. So you didn't mention that. So, but you left that as a question for the children. So that's why I'm asking.
Okay, thank you, Kim. With each of the lessons, there's a section on background knowledge. So it's provided in there as to why the International Freedom Festival came into existence. But would you like to expound on your second point about 67? Because maybe there's something that we need to add in about the cancellation in 67?
Well, it has to do with the creation of the Freedom, of the International Freedom Festival as well. The two largest sponsors of the Emancipation celebrations for quite some time were the city of Detroit and the city of Windsor. Those were the two major sponsors. Everybody else was, mom and pop stores and so on and so forth. But in 67, after the Emancipation, the celebration was canceled because of our rebellion on this side of the river. Both cities withdrew their sponsorship. So the major money that it would take to put on a Emancipation celebration, such as what was happening, they didn't have the funding. It was at that time that they actually did create the International Freedom Festival. And as Walt Perry, and I hate to admit this, but I have to admit to the fact that I was there in 67. So all the uproar, I was a little younger, but nonetheless, I can give you a little bit more background on what's there, and I don't know if you knew what was there, but what Walt Perry put forth, and that probably was contributing, because he was so heavily involved as Mr. Emancipation in the event, more so than most of the rest of the board members, that probably contributed to his death, because he had a major heart attack and died on the 1st of August, 1967, no less. So that said, at the end of July is when the cities withdrew their sponsorships. They made an announcement that they were not going to fund it anymore. And yes, and that's why Walt blamed them for it being racially motivated. And I would agree with him, because it was the sign of the time. 67 and 68 were a very hot time in our region. The only thing that cooled it down was the Tigers winning the World Series in 68. That kind of was the waving of the white flag, and everybody was happy. But between, both those, that bookended amount, 68 was a very hot time in America.
Yes.
There were riots in Newark, and they were everywhere. It was quite a time. Right after the Civil Rights Act had been signed, and some of the old guard wasn't quite sure they wanted to follow along with the Civil Rights Act, but so it's the law of the land. So all of that fed into it. And the Freedom Festival, I would go so far as to say, I agree totally with what Walt said. My grandfather was arguing the same point. Hence, that's why my grandfather, who at right before 67, as 67 happened, is when he stepped down. The chairman of Emancipation in 68, because at that point, well, he was chair and president. I don't know how you term it, but at that point, when Walt died, my grandfather went back across the river and tried to mind his own business, and that was pretty hard for Russell Small. Became Howard Watkins. Howard was the one that canceled it in 68. And there's a Windsor Star. I've seen it. I can't tell. You'd have to probably go through your newspaper file that I know you have, Shantelle, and find a newspaper clipping, because the Windsor Star interviewed Howard about that. And I have read it, but it's been a long time.
Great. That's good to have a resource for students.
Yes,
like
thank you so much, Kim. You actually are. I'm going to interview you, if that's okay, but you're one of our next steps. You and I had a lengthy conversation, I remember, about 2 months ago, but this information is great, and I'd like to include it, and also maybe a quote from you as well on the International Freedom Festival that we could even pair with Irene's. I think would work well for students. So you okay with me?
Well, the reason why you need to include that kind of historical knowledge, okay, fortunately, because I got up this morning, praise God, I was here when all this was happening. And all of it was going swirling around me. So I can give you a lot of that feedback, where you younger folks weren't here. So you need to, from my vantage point, you need to be able to give these children the deal. They can think through it, but they need to know that, yes, there were people that acted like that. They need to know that, and then be able to grasp the questions, and then take what they see around them today and be able to spit it back out at you.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Kim. I'll definitely be in touch to record you. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had another question as well, and it's regarding Walter Perry, and he's known as Mr. Emancipation, and I totally agree that he deserves the recognition that he's getting. But you'd mentioned that churches and organizations, and Kimberly mentioned a board of directors, were also involved in this. I think oftentimes people have one, like we think of Harriet Tubman when we think of Black history. When we think of Emancipation, we think of Walter Perry. I just wondered if you had any thoughts on why you think that this has happened in the emancipation through the emancipation lens, that we often think of Walter Perry, and or if you disagree, do you think that churches and organizations get just as much recognition? I'd love to hear about that as well, as to why it's oftentimes one figure who's seen as the representative of an entire event when there's so many different components and people involved. Was it maybe because he was so outspoken in the press, rightly so, or the Progress book, he was featured in it? Do you think those are some factors that were behind it?
I do. I think having the historical records, which there are a lot of historical records that reflect Walt Perry and his contributions, whereas when we had to find out about organizations and community allies, we had to go into archival material and, you know, speak to people in the community. We had to do a little bit of digging. It wasn't as easy as finding information about Walt Perry. So I think sometimes it's just, like you said, the outspokenness. It's just who is really represented in the historical record. Because you're right, it took multiple people to pull this off year after year to make it a success. There was a committee, but a lot of those people remain, you know, unsung heroes, really.
And if I could just add to that, I think it's sometimes the way we study. It's the availability of records is one thing, and we did have to do a lot of digging. But one of the things we tried to stress all the way through is that this was the response of the Black community on both sides of the border. They all came together, and that was, I think, maybe an achievement of Walter Perry, is bringing everyone together. But it's like a general can't march into battle without their troops. Sorry, you're just one person. So this was very much a community effort, and it brought not just, you know, the Black community together with this, but it also was bringing together the Windsor community, where you had many different groups. We were looking at the intersection of now this is not all, it's all buried into our curriculum here, but intersection with the Indigenous community, the Jewish community, many different creeds, many different groups. The Catholics were marching, the Orange Parade was marching, the Masons were there. It was very, very pluralistic in that sense. But history, we tend to simplify sometimes, and as it's easier to grasp. So sometimes people just do the great events, the great, you know, what we call the great men or great people of history. That's kind of a first step in this. But anyway, I think Kimberly would like to say something.
Yeah, go ahead, Kim, if you have something to add.
Yeah, the only thing that I'd like to add, and this goes along with Lorene, or was that Mary Kate? That was Lorene speaking. The McCurdy collection. I don't know if you guys use that, but in the McCurdy collection, there is a lot of formation material. Board of directors, I think possibly the articles of incorporation or what have you, because I've been there too and it's been a long time, of the formation of and I always get it, the Brotherhood of the British, yeah, BAA, you know what I'm talking about.
CP,
okay.
Yeah.
And that board are who are responsible for emancipation. That is who founded, well, they didn't but they founded the celebration we know as the Emancipation celebrations, because of course before that they were held in Patterson Park, and they were driven by the Underground Railroad community, which Emancipation celebrations was too. But when they got a form, they actually patented the name and created a whole backdrop on how it was to be run. So if you were, as Lorene was saying, there is literally a list of the originators or the founders of the BACCB, whatever, in the McCurdy collection. And from that point is where you can really divest, as Lorene said, to bring up who else was involved. I posted, just to use an example, for Emancipation, I had a caricature that was originally on, I think, the second or third page. And I don't know if Shantelle, you saw it because you didn't I didn't see your little like, so I figured you didn't, but it's a caricature of all the guys that ran the barbecue pit. And I'll be happy to give that to you to use in the curriculum. But the people in that were my grandfather, Clarence Carter, my cousin Pat, known as Forrest. His name was Forrest. We called him Pat. That was Hilda Watkins' husband, and Walt Perry. And those four were known to run the barbecue pit and then run a lot of the stuff in the background. But they were four of, I believe Clarence Carter was one of the original board members. But if you look through the list, Dr. McCurdy, I mean, it's a list of everybody that you would know. But that's where I think Lorraine's statement comes in. Walt, all he did all year was play Mr. Emancipation. That's what he did. That's who he was. He had one of those personalities with the cigar, and that's who he was. But all of these other, and of course, Dr. McCurdy became, an MP. So, I mean, all of these other people were literally driving this, but they, Walt was the front man because he was who he was. Mm-hmm. And it became him, he took it on and it became him. So he deserves all the credit for that front, but there was a whole lot of brain power that was behind that, and I think you need to give that credence to what Lorraine said. That would add to the curriculum, because if you're going to share that curriculum, you can't share it and say Walt was the only one out here working, because there was other things going on. Hence, that's why everybody got mad in 67 and 6. They had a reason to, and you had people. You had Dr. McCurdy and the Watkins, Pat, my cousin Pat at that point was president of the union. You had some big timers that got mad about what was going on with Windsor and Detroit. So that's the backdrop of what the front man was saying. I thought they were going to have another mutiny. It was pretty heated. And to this day, as one of the descended granddaughters, I'm still mad for them, because they knew full well that when Windsor and Detroit created the Freedom Festival that now is called Detroit River Days, that whole memory is going to get wiped out. And they're right. That's why I'm saying to you guys, you need to put that back in there for these kids so they get that memory back. And I'm done, and you can interview me. Bye.
Definitely, Kim. Thank you so much. I've just written down a whole page. You know how I take notes, Kim. Really looking forward to interviewing you and including a lot of your statements, your memories, your experiences. I think it's all very valuable, and I appreciate that you're willing to do that. Thank you. And I also appreciate your guidance and mentorship through this whole process.
Likewise, Kim. Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, excellent comment, Kim. I did have one more question that I wanted to ask. And if anyone in the audience has a question, please feel free to either raise your hand or put it in the comment section. But I wondered, you mentioned this is 20 lessons, which that is so much information, but I'm sure you had more information that you probably wanted to include as well. Could you speak to any parts of the curriculum that you wish you could have included, but you had to keep out because of the keeping within the 20 lesson plans? Is there anything that stands out?
I can just jump on that and a lot of stuff. Shantelle and I call ourselves the research rabbits, because we went down so many rabbit holes. This, you're seeing what we've condensed and could put together that totally matches the grade 10 Canadian curriculum. What we'd like to do is include other things and links, and we've done a lot of that too for extension activities and additional information. And I could just pinpoint one right off the top of my head: the whole World War II military service situation. We were encountering so many fascinating other members of, of the black members of the military and their roles and what they faced. It was just incredible. Like when I was looking at Wilson Brooks and his records with the RCAF, it was absolutely unbelievable, the number of sorties that he went through, all the kinds of stuff, like even just getting onto the planes, the Hurricane 3 planes that you couldn't even squeeze into. You had to put your backpack in first and then go through it. And you were sitting there in the dark with a pencil light and then poking your head up in this glass, totally exposing your head to the enemy fire, okay, to actually work with a pencil and a pen to calculate, all this navigational mathematics. just all kinds of stuff like that that would interest students. So many more heroes. I don't want to speak for Shantelle, but she can tell you more about Ella Jackson. All kinds of, and the schools. We looked at the roles of schools and teenagers on the home front in the Second World War. So many fascinating things. Another thing we wanted to do too is an interactive map, okay, that shows we became very aware of, if you were Black and in Windsor, where you could go and where you couldn't go. All right, which parks, which different things like that you couldn't go to, all those unspoken codes. So we wanted to actually have, and then the whole erasure of the Black community, like physically through urban renewal. So we wanted to have a series of maps going from the earlier stages in the 20th century right up to sort of the urban renewal, and show sort of every 5 years what was happening. Okay, and all the different places, these places that students would plaque, okay, that have been erased or moved.
And I would just echo Kathy's sentiments about the World War II efforts. I wish I could have expanded the section on Ella Jackson. It was just very difficult to find any information on her. She doesn't have any descendants. I was able to contact 2 family members, one in Detroit, one here, but very limited information. And her story is just, I mean, Kathy and I would just pour over stuff for hours. Like, we went through the war diaries to find out, because it was almost as though she was erased. You almost wouldn't even know that she was a member of CWAC if you didn't really dig very, very deep. So I wish we could have added more about her, and I wish we had access to some of the archives that we didn't have access to. So we've had to like omit a few organizations, but that's really it. But I'm sure if we had more time, we could have developed another 20 lessons.
Oh,
I'm
easily.
sure.
Thank you. And also too, because of COVID and my inability to travel, looking after 4 90-year-olds in my family, I have to be extra careful. And we were basically quarantining the whole time. I couldn't get to Windsor. We couldn't get access to a lot of documents and archives. And Kimberly mentioned other clubs and stuff like the Guardian Club, things like that. We'd love to get to that. We had the War Mothers. We were able to find bits and pieces, and we cobbled things together. But it'd be really great to be able to sit down, do interviews with people who were actually involved in that, or their relatives were, and see what they have in terms of letters and things like that. There's so much more we could do. Oh my goodness. So, and we hope to add, we see this as not a final piece, but something organic that we can include to develop and grow as more people hopefully will come forward as students study this with letters as well, and things from their families.
Yeah, I was going to say as well, there's hope that more people will hear about this and contact you. Sorry, Shantelle, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, in case you were about to wrap up, something I mentioned at the beginning, I just wanted to say thank you to my grade 5 teacher who's here today, which is really cool that I'm presenting something on a curriculum to someone, who once taught me at Victoria Public School. So thanks again, Miss Bassett, for being here. That was so sweet of her to attend. That's all. I just wanted to make sure I got that in there.
What a full circle moment. Oh, and Sue, you can go ahead and say your comment as well.
I just wanted to say how well your presentation has been laid out. You've done a wonderful background knowledge. You understand what is needed in order to present to grade 5 students. It can't be above their head. It has to be right at where they understand. And one of the things that really intrigues me is now you have so many you have terrific resources here in Windsor and in Detroit. You're very lucky in that respect. So you should be able to get everything all together, and I look forward to perhaps maybe even reading the whole presentation again. Thank you very much. It was a great presentation.
I appreciate you, Miss B. Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Excellent. If there's no other questions, I just wanted to add as well, you had a comment in the comment section, wonderful presentation, what a wealth of knowledge. And also Kimberly added a further comment, the progress book that she was holding up. She says her grandmother wrote on the cover that Walt died August 17th, 1967 is what she has in the comments. So
right after it was canceled.
yeah.
I can only imagine the stress on his heart and the tension at that time.
Yeah, when his whole
Absolutely.
life purpose, was that he's an amazing figure. I think I've just come more and more to appreciate what he, and of course supported by the committee, and being able to pull that many people together. He's just he's a networking genius. He's something else. And we hope that we've provided through the military aspect, through Walter Perry, the other people, the speakers, new Canadian heroes for this next generation of students.
I think you've done that. Absolutely. And the students who get to learn from this curriculum are incredibly lucky. I wish that something like this existed when I was in school as well, at many levels. So I'm just so grateful for this contribution that you've made. And thank you so much for sharing this information today. And hopefully once we post this, even more people will learn about it and hopefully reach out to you if they have information they can share with you. So again, thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us today as well. And unless the two of you had anything further to add, we'll end it there.
I'd just like to say thank you to you, Lorene, and to Amherstburg Freedom Museum. Mary Catherine, you've been really generous with all your resources. We really appreciate the ongoing support that we got from you. Thank you.
And anything we can do to support, we're here. If we've got the information, we want to share it with you. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.